cute.
Question: what happens when you team legendary director Wes Craven with the same screenwriters who would eventually go on to write Norbit, as well as some of the absolute worst Disney sequels of all time? Well, you get Vampire in Brooklyn, often considered to be one of Wes Craven's worst films, and yeah, it certainly is. Definitely one of his worst. Not gonna lie, it's not my soul to take bad, but my god, it's still pretty bad. I find it both hilarious and baffling that a man who created a good, solid series of horror comedies would first have to make one of the dumbest horror comedies ever put to film. I mean, wow! What bothers me the most about Vampire in Brooklyn is that it has Eddie Murphy playing a vampire and it's not fucking funny. This movie throws so many different types of humor at you, and none of it works. It's fucking depressing. Annoyingly depressing, in fact. It's an unscary horror film, an unfunny comedy, and never do the horror or comedy elements really find a balance. Tonally, it's a film that's just all over the place. Now, is that to say there isn't anything good in it? No, there's a couple things here and there that are fine, but even these things aren't enough to really save it. Vampire in Brooklyn is simply an unfocused mess. Vampire in Brooklyn sees the last vampire, Maximilian, played by Eddie Murphy, arriving in Brooklyn on his quest to find the descendant of this old vampire tribe or some shit, it's not really explained very well, in order for him to survive. We meet this woman, a headstrong cop named Rita, played by Angela Bassett, as Max, along with his ear-piercingly annoying henchman Julius, attempt to bring her to their side and make her a vampire. Along the way, we learn more about both of their pasts, while Bassett's kind of boyfriend, Detective Justice, yeah, it's that kind of movie, tries to save her when he learns that Max is a vampire. Okay, let's focus on the comedy. It's pretty awful for the most part. Half the time I sat in front of the screen asking myself, how is this comedy? What was even the joke? I understand that humor is subjective and I'm sure this movie has its fans, maybe like one or two, but I'm sorry. I only got a few minor chuckles out of this movie, and none of them had anything to do with the comedy. The few things I did laugh at were just unintentionally hilarious. I mean, look at this! My god! Is Eddie Murphy a vampire or a fucking Klingon? Are you serious? Apparently, Eddie Murphy's one condition for doing this movie was that he wanted to play the character of Max completely straight, and it just doesn't work. There's a few moments in the second half where he's kind of intimidating, but for the rest of the film, his acting is completely unfocused. He gets some meaty dialogue in the second half, but it's a chore to get to. He'll go from talking mild-mannered to talking like a demon in the span of a millisecond. It's like watching the teacher from the Fairly Odd Parents playing a vampire.
Admit it! You have very good parents!
Now, Murphy playing it straight could have been funny if the script called for it. Look at Ghostbusters. I've said in the past that the comedy in that film worked so well because the actors played it straight. But again, that's because the script for Ghostbusters called for that. 2 of the 4 main actors wrote the script for Ghostbusters and they didn't waste time setting up obvious gags. Vampire in Brooklyn does waste its time setting up obvious gags, and because Murphy plays it straight, the gags don't work. I know Murphy was trying to do something different with his performance, which I do respect. It's definitely unlike anything we've seen from him before or since, but it just didn't work for me. And most critics and audiences had pretty much the same reaction, so I know I'm not alone on that. But it's not really just that. There's other scenes that are meant to be funny featuring Murphy playing different characters. He plays a Reverend Sharpton parody talking about evil ass being a good thing, and another one where he's in whiteface playing a thug named Guido. And I'm sorry to report that these cameos were more Norbit than they were Nutty Professor. His sidekick, Julius, is one of the most annoying characters I've seen in any movie. There is nothing to this character. He's a couple of terrible one-liners and a dumb smile. The movie just focuses on him far too often.
That's what I'm talking about. It's about time. Let's heat it up on these motherfuckers. Go in there and rip off his head and shit down his neck. Boys, act like a vampire.
Where did you get that?
This? Oh, that's from Bloomingdale's. I kicked in the window and took it off one of the little white mannequins. He stand there like this. I figure I can use it more than he can.
Hey, oh, you're improvising.
Hey.
It's very good. You're turning into my best ghoul ever.
The same can be said for our hero of the picture. He's not annoying, but my god is he bland. They do try to give him some depth, you know, like he's a respectable guy, so Max can't corrupt or transform into him in order to trick Rita. But there's just not enough to him to make us care about what happens to him in the end. He feels like some love interest that they threw into the film so that Rita could have someone to save her, but spoiler alert, sorry, Rita doesn't even end up really needing his help in the end. She saves herself, so yeah, why? Tonally, the film is a mess. Remember when I said earlier that the horror and comedy elements don't find a balance? That's because the first half is almost all comedy, and the second half is almost all horror. And really not even good horror. By the time the second half rolled around, I was too annoyed by Julius's annoying dialogue to give a crap. Now, are there any saving graces to this film? Well, yeah. Vampire in Brooklyn is bad, but it does have its redeeming quality. The film is shot very well, despite the fact that barely any of this film takes place during the day. Seriously, I counted like 3 day shots in the whole movie. Craven's crew must have been pissed. Regardless, Wes Craven did give Brooklyn a dark, brooding atmosphere that a film like this should require. It's completely undermined by the plot and annoying characters, but it is there. Also, as much as I complain about most of the actors in the film, the one that does a great job throughout its entirety is Angela Bassett. She is wonderful in this film, and she has a strong presence. I'll also give credit that she does have an interesting character. The background could have been fleshed out a little more, but at least they didn't give her annoying one-liners. There's also nice little cameos from actors in past Craven films. Wendy Robbie from The People Under the Stairs plays a religious nut in a police station. Mitch Pileggi plays a gangster who gets his heart ripped out. Even the late Zakes Moke from The Serpent and the Rainbow plays a Van Helsing type character who's dealt with Max before and tries to help our main hero. Admittedly, he also gave a good performance and his character was taken seriously. I actually enjoyed his few cameos. Lastly, while some of the makeup was questionable, as I showed earlier, some of it was actually fine. It wasn't all bad. Aside from that though, Vampire in Brooklyn was a huge misstep for Wes Craven. The funny moments aren't funny, the scary moments aren't all that scary, and the story comes off as a convoluted, unfocused mess with annoying characters. A couple things admittedly worked, but they weren't enough to save the film. And in the end, I'm giving Vampire in Brooklyn a D+.
Quickest way to a woman's heart is through the church.
It's actually through the rib cage, but that's a bit messy. Being undead
You got the dropsies.
won't be worth living.
I'm a cop. If you try anything funny, I'll shoot you.
Vampire in Brooklyn.